Hi, Naomi. So we've
Hi.
just had a little pre-chat, haven't we? And a little bit teary-eyed already because obviously what we're talking about is really important to us, and we're really passionate about what we're talking about. So Naomi, I've you've you and I have been on Twitter, on social media, talking about cardiac arrest. The reason being is because you lost your wonderful son and I lost my wonderful dad. And if people are looking rather than just listening, they'll see a picture of both wonderful men in the background here. It's not an easy thing to talk about. And I know for one, I've got tissues beside me because I think I'm going to get upset when we talk, but it's just normal human nature to get upset about, talking about people you love that you've lost. So Naomi, I think I contacted you, didn't I, just in January after I lost my dad, because I came across your tweet about your lovely Jay and that you lost him, and I was shocked that you're a mum on Twitter who's lost your 18-year-old son. And I remember contacting you and saying, we don't know each other, but this is a situation I'm in, and I just wanted to say hello. So we've been in contact ever since probably late Jan, early February. Obviously, I've watched in awe with what you've done with your defibrillator campaign, and I'm going to stop talking now, and you're going to tell me and everyone who's going to hopefully listen about Jay, what happened, what's happened thereafter, the impact it's had on your family losing Jay. And I'll be open, Naomi, and say the reason that we want to do this is because we want people to realise that it's not unique what's happened, and you don't have to be unfit or unhealthy to have a cardiac arrest. And I think that's what really we want to get out of today, isn't it? Chatting with each other is for people to watch this and realise that, God forbid, but this could happen to anybody I love, and they don't have to have a weak heart, or they don't have to have 10 burgers and 300 cigarettes a week or whatever it is. This could happen inexplicably and suddenly and shockingly to anybody. So Naomi, do you want to share whatever you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I should say straight away that my absolute favourite thing to do is talk about Jamie. I love talking about him because I'm truly the proudest parent of him. Like every day, even now. I mean, when he was here, I was a very proud parent, and I still am today. I probably get prouder by the day. So Jamie turned 18 in November 2021. He was a fit, like you say, healthy young boy. He didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't take drugs. He was he was halfway through his second year plumbing course at college. He was training to be a plumber. He'd recently passed his driving test, so he started driving, which was his absolute favourite thing. He was a fisherman, so you would quite often at the weekends find him sitting by a lake. But he was just a chilled out boy. He lived for his family and his pets and his friends. He loved his mates. He would sit and play computer with his mates, with his bearded dragon sitting on one shoulder and his dog sitting on the bed behind him. And to him, that was like the ideal weekend. And then at New Year, going into 2022, I was actually on holiday with Jamie's stepdad. We were away for our 10th wedding anniversary, which actually was on New Year's Eve. And I got a phone call at just after 2:30 English time from Jamie's dad to say that where was I? And I said, I'm in the hotel. It wasn't even midnight where we were. We were in Canada. And he said, Jamie's had a heart attack. He's collapsed and had a heart attack. And I'd probably go through that I probably go through that phone call a million times a day. And Jamie's dad couldn't talk very well to me, so I went on the phone to a doctor, and Jamie had collapsed outside his friend's house. He'd been out New Year's Eve. They were watching some fireworks. They were at his friend's house, not out in the pub or anything like that. He was at his friend's house, and they'd had a pizza that his friend's mum had made for Jamie, because he was a massive pizza fan. And they'd been watching some fireworks, come back into the garage area where they were all standing, and they were having a bit of a dance on the Alexa, listening to the music. And Jamie just turned to his friend and said, "I feel a bit funny." Those were his actual words. Didn't say that he felt poorly or in pain. He just said, "I feel a bit funny." He'd walked out the front of the garage and he'd sat down by a tree, and as he sat down, he went into cardiac arrest. His friend Josh did CPR on Jamie for 13-14 minutes. A policeman turned up, sadly didn't have a defibrillator in his police car. The boys can be heard saying on the 999 call that there's a defibrillator in the school, which is 2 minutes away from where Jamie collapsed, but sadly it was inside the school, so they couldn't get it. They even talk on the call about smashing a window to get in there and get it. And I mean, they just waited and waited, and the first ambulance didn't turn up until 17 minutes and 33 seconds. And they weren't actually at Jamie's side until 19 and a half minutes. The second paramedic turned up at 22 minutes, and a doctor was on scene at 35 minutes. But they actually managed to get Jamie's heart beating again. But sadly, after spending 4 days, I got back to Jamie the next morning. British Airways got us on a plane, and we got back to Jamie very quickly, and I was with him on the Sunday morning, and we still had hope at that point. They told us that it was a slim hope, but that there was still some brain activity, and I thank goodness now that I could be there with him and talk to him. We slept in a bed with him, and we cuddled him, we bathed him, we washed his hair, everything that we wanted to do as parents. And his brother and his stepdad and my sister was there, and we all spent some lovely time with Jamie. But sadly, on the Tuesday, they told us that due to the oxygen starvation to Jamie's brain, he was brainstem dead, and we lost him on the 5th of January. I should probably say that Jamie had signed up to be an organ donor, so we knew that he was an organ donor, but the organ donation people got in touch with us on the 4th of January and said Jamie had actually signed the register 3 times. He signed it when he was 16, he signed it again when he applied for his driving license, and then he signed it the day after his 18th birthday. We don't know why. Nobody can answer that question for us now, but he was obviously determined that he was going to save a life if anything happened. And we said goodbye to him on the 5th of January, and on the morning of the 6th of January, he saved 5 lives, including an 8-month-old baby girl. So, as much as nothing makes any of this any better, the pride we have for what he chose when he was here with us meant that there are 5 people walking around today. And we have heard since that they are all okay as well, and all of Jamie's organs are still working. So sadly for us, that's when all the questions started, because like I said before, Jamie was a fit, healthy boy. He hadn't been drinking, he hadn't been smoking, he hadn't done any drugs, he hadn't even experimented with any drugs, or and the huge question of why started running around our heads. And sadly we had to wait a really long time, and still we're still searching for that reason. Jamie's heart was examined by the best pathologist cardiologist in London, and she told us that Jamie's heart was the healthiest heart that she'd ever seen. So for this healthy heart to have stopped, that, like you said before, that brings it home that it could be anybody. It could happen to anybody at any age, anywhere, anytime. He wasn't running a marathon, he wasn't playing a sport at the time, but by the same token, he could have been. He was an energetic lad. he had a huge zest for life, and you know, he used to go out with his mates, and he used to go for walks, and but it was something as simple as standing watching fireworks and walking out the front of the garage, and that's when it happened. So we decided in January that we wanted to raise money for a defibrillator to put it on the outside of the school near to where Jamie collapsed. And I remember Jamie's brother Callum said to me, oh, we'll probably get about 800 quid because Jamie's a lovely lad and lots of people know him. You know, we thought, well, if 500 people donate £2 each, we might even get £1,000. And we started the Just Giving page on the 26th of January. And on the 27th of January, there was over £3,000 on there. I woke up and looked at my phone in the morning. I was like, oh, there must have been some mistake here, because it's Just Giving says 3,300 and something. And then we quickly realised that not just the people of Rugby, but a lot of people had seen sort of what we wanted to do, and it just went crazy. So we thought, well, okay, then we'll just keep on going. We'll just, you know, if we can get 2 defibrillators, if we can get 3 defibrillators, let's do that. And we had 3 defibrillators installed at various places in Rugby. One was at Jamie's college, one was at the school, like I mentioned, and one was at a pub just down the road from where Jamie went to college. And all of those 3 got installed, and then we just kept going. It kind of took over us, and it gave me something to focus on as a mum. I was trying to kind of get myself out of the shock of losing Jamie, which still, it hits me now still. But we thought, well, let's just see if we can make a difference. And I always said right at the beginning after we lost Jamie, and I'm sure you feel the same about your lovely dad, that I didn't want him to just be a number or a statistic. He was never just going to be that lad that died at New Year. I knew he was meant to make a difference. I knew there was something more he was meant to do. So yeah, this week we're having our 25th defibrillator installed, and we've raised over £50,000 since January. But I think more important than that is the fact that people are talking about cardiac arrest, and people are recognizing that it can happen to anybody, a fit, healthy person. It doesn't have to be that stereotypical view of somebody who's eats bad food or takes drugs or drinks alcohol. There is no rhyme or reason to a cardiac arrest, and it can impact such a huge amount of lives. It's not just myself and my family and Jamie's brother, his friends. You know, I can't imagine what they go through every day. They're still struggling in counselling because of what they went through, and the amount of people that are close to Jamie that still say to me, but why have you got a reason yet? And sadly, I have to just keep saying, no, it was sudden arrhythmic change to Jamie's heart, and we're never going to know why. But I think that's what people need to realise, is that there doesn't have to be a reason. This can happen to anyone, one of your friends or relatives, and you know, it sends a shockwave through your whole being. To lose somebody like Jamie, I mean, obviously I know Jamie probably better than anybody. He was my baby boy, but everybody that ever came into contact with him will say the same thing, that he was just the most precious, amazing boy, and ironically, with just a heart of gold and the biggest heart. And sadly, that failed him massively on that awful night. And obviously there was a lot of other factors involved, but it just meant that we just didn't have him anymore. But if that awareness spreads and continues to spread, and we manage to save one more person and one more family and one more community having to go through this, then everything we're doing for Jamie will be worth it. It's our way of continuing to look after him and make sure that his face is never forgotten.
Yeah, it's absolutely, you know, Naomi, we were talking for about half an hour or something before we went live here, and you know, I could talk to you all day, and it's still going to be upsetting and shocking listening to what happened. And you've taken all the words I ever use out of my mouth as well, you know, talking about defibrillator use and CPR and having the defibrillators there accessible to the public. is so important. And I think back to, and probably you're the same, Naomi, you think back to before this happened to our families, our communities, before this happened, we probably walked past defibrillators, didn't even give them a second glance, probably didn't even think about what they were for. And for me, Naomi, one of the most important things for me is, yes, we absolutely need defibrillators. We absolutely need every single person in this world to know how to perform CPR. I absolutely believe that. We first and foremost need people to recognize the signs of a cardiac arrest. And I'll just briefly talk about what happened with my dad, and then, if you don't mind, Naomi, if you could just talk about after that the impact that losing your Jay has had on your family's life, because you don't have that love there in your house. He's not there to love you. You're giving that love in a different way now through our J Foundation. And I know from our part, our family, it's such a huge loss, and it's when it's unexpected as well, because you know, we've lost family members to terminal illness before, and it's horrible and it's heartbreaking, but you can come to terms with it a bit more when it's something so sudden. It's you're trying to wrap your head around what's happened. And sometimes you're probably like me, Naomi, like I see my dad used to love his dark chocolate ginger stem gingers, and sometimes I'll still see something like that in the shop, and I'll be like, oh, I'll get them for dad, and then I think, oh, he's not here. You know, it's these little impacts as well, isn't it? And you know, I've found myself quite a few times standing in the Sainsbury's aisle looking at a Bonville chocolate bar, and I just have burst into tears, you know, because that's what reminds me of my dad, you know. But you know, I think, my God, Jamie's friends, I can't imagine what they're going through, because my dad collapsed by our side at Fulham football ground. We were playing Blackpool, and for anyone who knows about Fulham season last season, they'll know it was one heck of a show. And you know, Alexandra Mitrovic was banging in goals left, right and centre, and we were having a great time. And that match day, 29th of January, was just like any other match day, you know. We went to the game. Dad was there beside us, like always. And what you said about your Jay, how he said to his friends, I don't feel right, you know, it that really sort of gave me a bit of a shudder, because my dad almost said exactly the same thing. He's so there's myself, my daughter, my cousin's daughter, and then my dad, and then in front of my dad is my cousin. And he tapped my cousin on the shoulder just after we'd sat down, after having a dance celebrating Alexander Mitrovic's 28th goal of the season, and we'd all just sat down, as you do. And he just tapped my cousin on the shoulder, and he said, I don't feel very well. And he said it like that in his really cheery voice. And I was face on looking at the game, didn't initially know anything was wrong. And then my cousin just shouted at me and went, Claire, your dad, he's not well, there's something wrong. And I looked round, and he just slumped. He just like that, just slumped. And what I always say, Naomi, to people as well is it's not like in the movies. You know, when you see in the movies someone has a heart attack or a cardiac arrest and they're spluttering and falling on the floor. That wasn't what it was. He just slumped. His head just went forward, and that was it. So I just remember I got out of my chair really, really quickly. I didn't even know I could move as fast as I moved that day. And I ran up to the stewards at the back who had the radios. And I said, please get help. My dad's, there's something happened to him. He's collapsed. Please get help now. And they looked as terrified as I must have looked. And I remember screaming at them, please get on the radio now, please get someone. And by the time I came down to Dad, there was a few people sort of waving their arms up and trying to, you know, find some help from somewhere, trying to alert people to what was going on. And when I got back, and initially, Naomi, I thought my dad had fainted. Because why wouldn't you? You know, he was fit, healthy, he came into the ground fine. Oh, the traffic was terrible today, and he sat down and he was fine, you know. And it was when my auntie Dawn was saying to him, Paul, have a drink, wake up, have a drink. And I thought, there's something wrong here. This isn't, he hasn't fainted, this is something worse. But I didn't go there, Naomi. I didn't go to cardiac arrest. My mind didn't go there. I didn't know where my mind was going, but it wasn't going there. Because, you know, to repeat what you said about your lovely Jay, my dad wasn't a drinker, he wasn't a smoker, he used to eat healthy. He was a fine looking man for a 69-year-old. He looked about 55, you know. He was a good looking man. He'd still turn heads down the street sometimes, you know. He was a lovely looking man. And he always had a smile on his face. And oh my goodness, we used to always say to him, stop walking so fast. Stop walking so fast, because he'd race off and it'd be like, Dad, you're almost jogging, just chill. You know, he had so much energy, he was so fit and healthy. And you know, when I got back down to the seats, there was an off-duty police officer who saw that we needed help, and he came from a few rows back. Actually, the police officer happens to be a Brentford fan, and I know you've been involved with Brentford.
Yeah,
and he was there with his mum and his mum's boyfriend. So he was there just out of the blue, you know. He was just there for the day watching Fulham. And he came over and he introduced himself. He said, I'm a policeman, I've got this, don't worry, I'll look after you all, I've got this. And I just felt this relief, like someone's going to help us. And I won't use his name because he's a police officer, and I think that would be wrong. So I'm going to call him Pete. That's not his name, but we'll call him Pete for this story. And Pete, he said, lift your dad's head up. And as we lifted Dad's head up, I thought he'd had a stroke, because his face had gone to the side. So my cousin lifted my dad's head up and I helped, and I looked at his face and his eyes were just trying to stay open. And I just remember putting my hand on his knee and saying, it's all right, Dad, we're getting help, help's coming. It's all right, we've got this, don't worry. And then his eyes closed, and we got the help. And this was probably all in seconds, no more than minutes. And we were lucky. We were really lucky. We had some off-duty doctors and on-duty medics from the Blackpool and Fulham team that came over from the pitch because the game was stopped. We had off-duty medics that were there enjoying the game. They came over, another off-duty police officer, bless him, he came over. We had a lot of help, and they did get Dad's heart beating again after 40 minutes, but it was faint. And I remember one of the police officers coming over to me and saying, we've got him back, but the heartbeat's very faint. So I went off to the hospital with him, and I remember saying to my family, don't tell Mum, my mum, and don't tell Nan, my dad's mum, because he'll be all right. They've got his heart back. Don't worry them. Let's get him to the hospital, get him, you know, all rigged up, and he'll be all right. And we'll tell him that he's in a hospital and he's given us all a fright when we get there. And we got there before we got out of the ground, and just as they were about to put Dad in the ambulance, he had a second cardiac arrest. And I knew he'd gone then. It was It was the most horrible thing to see, Naomi. It was so horrible, and I see it every day. I see his face. I was standing by his head, and I just saw this pain wash over his face, and I just knew he was gone. And they worked on him for ages in the ambulance, and then they got him into the hospital, and the doctors came to me eventually after about 30 minutes of working on him, and they said, we're still working on Dad, but you have to acknowledge that, you know, he's been about an hour now without his heart beating properly, so his brain will be severely damaged now. But we're going to keep on, we're going to try for another half hour, and if we don't get there, then you have to say goodbye to your dad. And to be honest, you know, I already sort of knew at this point, you know, you have that bit of hope, like you said, Naomi, you have that 1-2% of hope. And then I remember, you know, phoning my family and saying, you all need to get to the hospital because this isn't looking good. You need to get down here. And I just remember, obviously the doctor said we lost him, and obviously that's just, there's no words to describe what you go through when you're in that situation. And I was on my own in the hospital, you know. So, you know, I didn't even have anyone to like squeeze the hand off or anything. I was just there sat on my own in this waiting room, just feeling lost. And then, you know, I phoned the family and I said, we've lost him. But I said, I don't want Mum to know until she gets to the hospital, because I didn't want her to find out stuck in traffic in the car coming up to the hospital, and I wanted to be there for Mum when she found out. And it's one of the hardest things, Naomi, is having to tell your Mum that the man that she's been with for 50 years has gone. And I just remember her walking into that hospital room with a little bit of hope in her face, and I had to say to her, we've lost him, Mum. Yeah, and it was just the worst thing in the world to say to your mum. It was just, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, Naomi. I just wouldn't. And all I think is back to that day, and I just think I don't want anyone to feel like I feel right now. I don't want anyone to be telling this story. I want to be able to train people on recognizing the signs of a cardiac arrest, knowing how important it is to act quickly, having the public access defibrillators everywhere, you know, making people aware of the signs, because I felt bloody useless, Naomi. I stood there and did nothing because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know Dad was having a cardiac arrest. And in honesty, if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do either. I wouldn't have known how to help him. All I did was ask for help. And, you know, I say it to people all the time, you know, I say, I feel so guilty about that. And people say, but it wasn't your fault. But it was my fault because I had the opportunity to learn about CPR and first aid, and I didn't. And I hate myself for that, you know.
But the first person that got, or the first emergency service that got to Jamie on that awful night, he had to radio another police officer to go and get a defibrillator from the police station because there wasn't a defibrillator in his police car. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with him. And he said, I stood there looking at your son and I felt like my hands were tied behind my back because there wasn't a single thing I could do. I knew that I needed that defibrillator, which I'll be honest, like you say, I probably wouldn't have known. A year ago, it would
No.
never have crossed my mind that one of my children, one of my relatives might one day need one of these things in a yellow box on the side of a building. But he said, I literally felt like my hands were tied behind my back because his friends were desperately doing the CPR on him, and one of his friends' dad was doing CPR on him. And I knew that without that defibrillator, we were stuck. We couldn't help this young boy. And sadly, the defibrillator didn't even get on scene till 15 minutes. And obviously, I know now, I didn't know at the time, but I know now that it's just too long. An ambulance longer than 7 minutes when someone's in cardiac arrest is too long. A defibrillator on scene after 15 minutes was too long. It was just, everything was just too long. And like you say, I never would have known. I never did CPR training. I never did defibrillator training. And yet when I look at the training that we're trying to get out there now, I think it's just such a simple, and the same as you, I have a huge guilt that washes over me because I wasn't with Jamie on that night. And I know I'll never forgive myself that I wasn't there in that few minutes that he desperately needed me. But even if I had been there, I don't even know if I'd have known what to do. I think my husband says the same, and Jamie's dad says the same, that we wouldn't have known what to do. The policeman knew what to do, and he didn't have the tools to help him to bring Jamie back. But if Jamie's brain hadn't have gone so long without that oxygen, he could have absolutely still been here. But I keep trying to tell myself that there's no point in me feeling guilty because, you know, I couldn't be there, but he had the best help there with him.
Yeah.
His best friend Josh did CPR on him for so long, and he learned it off of a computer game. It was something as simple as that. But the fact that Jamie still had a shockable output at 19.5 minutes, they've told us since it's a 1 in a million chance that somebody does that good CPR on someone to have that shockable output still.
Wow.
So please don't feel guilty, because it doesn't matter if you've got the best medic on site even standing next to you, that waiting there to help your dad. If that defibrillator is not there in that short amount of time, the chances are so slim to be able to bring them back.
Yeah, we had, I mean, that's why we were so lucky, Naomi, because, you know, we were able to get a defibrillator on him quite quickly, but there was minutes wasted. I don't know how many. Probably, you know, for me, it felt like hours. It was probably a couple of minutes. But, you know, Naomi, this is, you and I are trying to achieve the same thing, in that we want to achieve the installation of as many defibrillators as possible in our local communities. You're obviously in the Midlands area, I'm in the London area, and hopefully one day we'll meet in the middle, you know. That would be a wonderful thing. That we'll both be in the same street going, that's the last one in the country now.
Maybe yours will be at one end of the street and ours will be at the other end of the street.
Exactly. But you know, it's taking the fear away. I was so frightened, and of course I was frightened. That was my dad who looked after us. You know, what are you doing, Dad? You're supposed to be looking after us, you know, because that's what my dad did. He was a proper dad. He looked after us, he looked out for us, he did everything for the people he loved. And you know, it's just that thing now where we can't help our lovely men in our lives, so we have to do the next best thing through their name and help others. And you know, this is why I contacted you, because I just thought this is a woman after our own hearts here, you know, pardon the pun, but we want to achieve the same thing, and it's not for any other reason. We don't want someone else to have that knock at the door or that phone call saying, you've lost your son, you've lost your dad, you've lost your wife to a cardiac arrest. Because Naomi, I think we're testament to the fact that it's the most effing horrible phone call, knock on the door, conversation you're ever going to have.
It will never leave me.
No.
Jamie's dad's words on that night, I probably go through that in my head overnight, like I say, 10 times a night. And it's, I find myself saying, don't think about that. Don't let that come into your head, because I know that's it. Once that's in there, it will play over and over and over. And do you know, I can't even remember what I said. I think I shouted and screamed, and I was so busy trying to put everything into a suitcase while I was still being told, because I knew straight away that I had to get back to his side and be there. And then when the doctor came on the phone and said, he's still with us, we've still got him, there's still some brain activity. And then a couple of hours later, I had a phone call with my mom who said, I've spoken to a nurse, there is still some brain activity, get yourself back safe as you can. And we sat in that airport in the early hours of the morning. It was completely empty. There was one young lad there who actually came over to me and said, do you want to borrow my phone charger? Because he could see that I was panicking so much about my phone dying, because that was the only link I had. And I was on the phone to the intensive care nurse, Lisa, and Lisa said to me, until you are by his side, he is my son, and I will look after him like he's my son. And hearing her saying that made me think, right, I can concentrate on getting back, get on the plane. And it was the most strange sort of 12 or 13 hours. Then we were waiting to get on the plane, and then everybody was trying to help us, and I can't even remember their faces. But then there was this one air hostess, Siobhan, and she sat with me the whole way back on the plane, just looking through photographs of Jamie. And the pilot moved our gate from the furthest one away where we were supposed to go to the gate 1, so that we could be taken off the plane straight away, and our car was there ready for us. And then we had a 2-hour journey from Heathrow up to Coventry that is a complete blur. I think me and my husband just sat there in silence, because I'd just got my sister and my mum and everybody on FaceTime that was just saying, he's still here, he hasn't gone into cardiac arrest again, his heart didn't stop again after that initial cardiac arrest. And I just remember sitting in the car thinking, well, that was a panic, but thank goodness he's okay and that he's going to pull through. And I remember saying to my husband, well, he's going to be all right though, isn't he, because he's still here. And my husband said, well, yeah, of course he is, it's Jamie. And I think that sits in my head, because like you say, well, it's Jamie, he's 18 years old, he's fit, healthy, of course he's not going to die from a cardiac arrest, because that doesn't happen. And I remember getting to the hospital and seeing Jamie, and obviously he was all wired up to all the life support, but I didn't even see the wires and the tubes, and because it was just Jamie. He was just Jamie laying there, and he just looked like Jamie, and he was warm. And I remember putting my hand onto his chest, and his heart was beating so strong. I could almost hear it. You know when you're falling asleep and you hear your own heartbeat? That's what I could hear with Jamie. His heart was still banging. And I turned to his dad and I said, well, he's fine. His heart's beating fine. And his dad, to be honest, I think I probably hadn't been told everything, because they just wanted me to get back and not to be the same as like you said for your mom. You don't want to hear over the phone the chances of what us keeping Jamie was so slim. And I remember Jamie's dad said to me, he was under for such a long time, you need to understand how long he went without oxygen. And then the A&E doctor came to us on that Sunday morning, and he was the most brutally honest person, but I knew that he had to be. And he said that the chances of Jamie ever leaving intensive care were below 1%. And I remember saying to him, well, losing him isn't an option, so let's concentrate on that below 1% and let's get him sorted out. And then I think I knew in that conversation that if Jamie ever did pull through, that it was never going to be Jamie. Yeah. And I remember talking to all my family and Jamie's brother and saying that if Jamie couldn't hold a PlayStation remote control or hold a fishing rod or cuddle his mum, then he wouldn't want that. He wouldn't want. But we we still carried on looking after Jamie, and like I said, we were allowed to wash his hair and bath him and take care of him and change his clothes and put his aftershave on, and just, we took it in turns to lay in the bed with him and cuddle him, and they even let us take his dog in to see him. But on the Tuesday we were told that it had just been too much of a catastrophic oxygen loss to his brain. And I think even though we knew on Sunday, hearing a cardiologist say that, that's when the shock sets in, because then you're like, well, that below 1%, in our heads it was huge.
Yeah.
But when somebody said, no, he's gone, the shock just overwhelms you, as you know, because even now, 11 months later, I'm like, I still think he's going to come through the front door. And because Jamie was being kept alive for another 24 hours so that he could donate his organs, I still, right up until that last minute, expected him to sit up and just turn to me and say, it's fine, I'm okay. Because he used to hate if I was worried. He would be like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And I just expected him to sit up in bed and tell me to stop crying. But I knew he wasn't going to do that. But I think that's, like I was explaining to you, that I put my anger into a jar. I think one of the things that makes me the most angry is because it was just so preventable. You know, if that defibrillator that was nearby had been on the outside of that school instead of locked in the building, it could have been on Jamie in less than 5 minutes. If the ambulances hadn't been 15 miles away, they could have got his heart beaten, and he wouldn't have had such a long wait for oxygen to be reaching his brain. And it just makes me so angry that a beautiful 18-year-old boy who I had so much to live for was just taken away in the most preventable circumstances. And that's why we fight. That's why we have to fight, because it just can't keep happening to people. It can't happen to families and, like you say, communities, and losing people like your dad and my Jay. It's a bigger loss. It's a bigger loss than what we feel. It's across the board. It's to have two such amazing, special people taken away is a loss for the world, because there aren't that many people out there like that. And it's just, something's got to change. Somebody's got to sit up and pay attention, because it's happening too much, and it's not fair. It's just not fair. I'm sorry, I get emotional, because I just think about what he'd be doing today if he was still here. And I'm sure you do the same every time you go to Fulham now, and you imagine how much your dad would be enjoying life. And my Jamie actually would probably be saying to me, Mom, get off the news, get off the radio, get out the newspaper. He'd be so humbled by it. But he'd also be so proud, and he would just be loving his life still. And we probably would never obviously have crossed paths, and we would have just carried on in I class it as my oblivious little world, because that's what I was up until New Year's Eve. I was just oblivious that this could happen to somebody, and it would never have been my Jamie. I don't expect any parent ever imagines outliving their child and going to their own child's funeral. But with Jamie, I just didn't, because he was just the most healthy boy, and I just could never have imagined not having him. I don't think any of us could have ever imagined what we were going to go through this year. But hopefully, with the changes that we're making and the defibrillators that we're installing and the awareness we're raising, one more family might not have to go through this, and a defibrillator will be on somebody quickly, and somebody will ring me up one day and say, one of Jamie's defibrillators has been used and it saved a life. And I know that he would literally be shining down and beaming with pride at the thought that he's done that.
Yeah, definitely, Naomi. And, you know, talking about defibrillators, the one thing that I know you stress and I stress and many people stress, and I have seen some little news snippets recently on some daytime TV that there's been some doctors showing how easy they are to use. And that's something that you know, we both can't stress enough, Naomi, isn't it, is how easy a defibrillator is to use. And you don't need to be medically trained, you don't need to be first aid trained. You could be 5 years old or 105 years old, and you can still use one of these machines. And the machine itself talks you through how to use it. There are some fantastic guides on YouTube, on British Heart Foundation, on Resus Council website, how to use these machines as well if you're not sure. You know, there's that fear, I think, that we see something and we get frozen in fear. What if I do the wrong thing? What if I actually make this person worse? If someone's having a cardiac arrest, Naomi, you know, we both know that the only thing you could do wrong is to do nothing at all. And you know, part of what we're doing isn't just giving the defibrillators where they're needed, fitting the defibrillators where they're needed, should I say, but actually trying to take the fear out of using them and make people realize that this is something that could happen in a split second, and every second counts. So we know the stats, Naomi, don't we? You know, for every minute somebody's in cardiac arrest, they lose 10% survival, chance of survival. So when you're talking about somebody not having a defibrillator on them for over 15 minutes, 17, 18, 19, 20 minutes, I mean, you're talking about very slim chances of survival. And that's why these machines do need to be everywhere. And like you said, you hope to God that no one would have to use them, but if they did, they're there. And hopefully someone can just think, you know what,
absolutely, and get them in police cars, get them in public transport, get them in buildings, but also get them in housing estates. I mean, you know, I know that lots of people campaign to get them for schools and sports grounds, running clubs, bowls greens, places like that. And don't get me wrong, that it is vitally important to get them there. But an awful lot of cardiac arrest, a very high percentage of cardiac arrests, happen in people's own homes or out in the community. And that's where Jamie was. You know, they need to be on fences, lampposts, walls, trees. Get them absolutely everywhere. If there was one every 100 meters, the community is safe. You can get that on a person within 2 minutes, and the chances of survival is still sitting above 70%. And to me, it's a no-brainer. If Jamie had that defibrillator on him in less than 4 minutes, he would be here. Even less than 6 or 7 minutes, there's a chance he would still be here today. So the ones that we're having installed at the moment, they have the accessible cabinets, and they come to £1,200. And somebody said to me once, I'll never forget, it was an older person, and she walked past where we just had one installed, and she said, oh, another one of them eyesores on the side of a building. And I remember looking at her and I said, do you actually know what's in the cabinet? She goes, oh no, I keep seeing these popping up everywhere, an eyesore on the side of the building. And she said it again, and I said, it contains a defibrillator that could save one of your family's lives. And she actually came back and spoke to me for a while, and I explained to her what we were doing, and she kind of backed down a little bit and said, how much do they cost? And I said, £1,200. And she went, wow, that's a huge amount of money. And I said, well, no, it's not, because in comparison to an 18-year-old's life, £1,200 is pennies. It's nothing. I would spend it 1,000,000 times over just to have 5 more minutes with Jamie. So when you're talking about £1,200 in the huge scheme of how our country works, we're in the top 7 richest countries in the world, and we're talking about £1,200 every 100 meters. It's nothing. It could save so many lives. And it grieves me so much that somebody could call a defibrillator cabinet an eyesore on the side of a building and then class £1,200 as a huge amount of money in comparison to saving somebody's life. It's just not a huge amount of money.
Oh, but well done for educating that lady, and hopefully she did go home and learn a bit more. And I think, you know, you said about your anger jar and putting your pieces of anger away, because you do need to just suppress it sometimes until you get the job done, your message out there. And you know, it is just about talking until your jaw hurts about what these defibrillators are, how important it is to know what a cardiac arrest is, to recognize the signs, to know how to help someone, to be not even confident doing CPR and using a defibrillator, but just not to be scared. Just don't be scared. Doing something is always better than doing nothing. And it, you know, you'll always get people who are going to speak negatively, always, but you and I are doing good things, Naomi, and we just need to keep doing what we're doing. And you know, you said, you know, that of course you have the negativity. We spoke about that off air, and we're not going to give those people any airtime, but you think about all the thousands and thousands of people that have contacted us over the last year-ish, going on to a year. The minority are negative. You know, we have got the majority of people behind us believing in what we're doing, believing in these eyesores. You know, we do have people believing in what we're doing, because like I say, Naomi, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. And the impact it's had on my family, my mum especially, you know, losing the man that she was married to for 48 years, that she was with for 50 years, the life she knew. You just wouldn't wish it on anyone, you know.
And that's what I do. I look at Callum, I look at Jamie's brother, and I think everybody thinks about the parents. And don't get me wrong, I've had such a huge, overwhelming amount of support from people that I've not even met, and you know, stranger, yourself for instance. But when I look at Callum and I think that's Jamie's brother, and he said to me before, he feels like half of him is gone now. And I think you don't realize the impact that's happening behind our faces. We've still got the willpower to keep going and keep fighting, because we know that it's what our beautiful men would want, that we can keep fighting. But behind us is this whole tribe of people that are just struggling to get through the days. And like you said earlier, the worry that people don't know what they would need to do in that situation. And somebody once said to me that somebody in cardiac arrest is in the worst possible situation that a human being can be in. You cannot make it worse. So no matter what you do, you can only make it better. So whether it's be to start CPR as quick as possible, making sure you've dialed 999, making sure that you're shouting for help, and making sure that somebody is going to get the nearest defibrillator, you cannot make that person in a worse situation than they're in. Cardiac arrest is as bad as it gets. So just, you know, and I just think to myself, I thank goodness that Josh and Tim were on with Jamie that night, because they did give him the best possible chance he had. And I know that they've both been awarded for that. So they've both been given commendations for how amazing they were on that scene. But I keep going back to that poor policeman who stood there and realised he didn't have that defibrillator, and that his hands were tied and there was nothing he could do. And I think he's got to live with that now for the rest of his life, and watching that, you know, our perfect boy slipping away, when it was just so simple to have that small piece of life-saving equipment in a car that could have been got out and on Jamie. And I just keep going back to the same thing, that it's so preventable, and there's so much more that people can be doing, and we just need the right people to stand up, get it out of their head and get it into the public, and get our government and our MPs and our funding provider and the NHS trusts to accept that these vital life-saving pieces of equipment are needed everywhere out in the communities, and it's a priority, and they need to step up and sort it out now. I don't want to ever read any more stories about your dad or my Jamie, because it doesn't have to be like that. It can be changed. I was reading a story the other day, and I don't know if you've heard this, but Denmark, for instance, their defibrillator campaign, they've gone from having a 9% survival rate of cardiac arrest to 65% now. And this is huge. I'm determined I'm going to go and visit Denmark, and I'm going to look, because they've got defibrillators everywhere and their government has backed their campaign. And that always makes me think, well, if one country can do it, then we can do it. It's doable. And all it needs is for somebody, the right person, to sit up and take notice. And instead of taking a photo opportunity, our MPs need to actually do something, not just appear on a leaflet or on the front of a newspaper. Actually do something that's going to make a change. Because if a grieving family can put 25 defibrillators in our community in 10 months, then what could the powers of the government actually change? And I think that's just so vital.
I couldn't agree with you more, Naomi. I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. And that's exactly what it does need, because, like you say, Denmark have shown that it's very possible. I know in the United States of America, they've also got a lot of defibs. I've got quite a few American friends, because Fulham and America have quite a close connection. There's quite a few American players in the Fulham team. So I have a lot of American friends, and that's what they all say to me. I've got friends in St. Louis, in Missouri, in Minnesota, in Boston, and they all say the same to me. We've got them everywhere, Claire, over here, you know? It's like, what the heck are we doing then? Why are we 10 steps behind? Look how many people are in this country, how many people are around any time of the day or night that could stop and use one of these defibrillators if someone needed help. And I don't know about you, Naomi, but I walk out of my house and I look, where are they? Where are these machines? And, you know, I walk and I make a point, just subconsciously now. Okay, I've walked 5 minutes, I've walked 10 minutes, and I've not seen one. I know there's one down there, but that's another 5 minutes away, you know, and I'm sure you do it too, Naomi. And this is it, you know, you just think, I should be seeing these. I should
Do you know
be
what, as well?
seeing
We hit so many barriers, Claire, as well, because we've had comments like, oh, it's not possible because of an electric supply. It's not possible because what if a member of the public walks into it? Or, you know, some of the comments we've had are shocking. And then my dad is a coach driver, and he took his school trip to Warwick Castle, and there's a defibrillator at the top of Warwick Castle. And I said, don't ever tell me that you can't put a defibrillator somewhere when there's one at the top of Warwick Castle. And that's how easy they are to install. You could have them everywhere. We've been approaching house builders. We're working with a company called Urban and Civic in Rugby. They have a number of land across the country, but they're building about 7,000 houses in a village local to Rugby called Holton. And we approached them and we said, in our opinion, when you're putting a piece of land together for new builds, it should be more important to have the plans ready for defibrillators than it should be for street lighting or fencing or schools or curbs, or because actually if the plans are there and the defibrillator can be installed right at the very beginning, right on them very first plans, we would never have a problem about electric supply or a plinth to put it on, because it's in the plan. So if they were planned from day one, they would be in every single new housing estate, one every 500 houses minimum. And then in the future, this problem is going to be gone, because all housing estates will have them. And it just seems like such a simple solution. And then that's when we found out that actually they do have defibrillators on new builds, but when the builders leave at the end of the new build, they take them with them. So by law, they have to have one for the health and safety of the workmen. But then when they're finished building, they take it. Well, surely just put it in a cabinet and leave it there. And then you're considering the health and safety of the community. To us, that was just the most simple, just put it in a cabinet. It will cost you 600 quid. That's it. Just, you know, and like I say, we're working with Urban and Civic, and they've now agreed to work alongside us and get those 7,000 houses safe. The first one is going up on their primary school, actually, that's just not long been built, and that's being installed tomorrow. And that's the first one in, and we're happy with that. But we're going to continue to campaign to get them to put one. Literally every time they build 500 houses, a defibrillator needs to go in. And if every new build did that, we're a step on the way. I know it's only one step on that ladder, but it's a step on the way. And eventually, I want our MPs to sit up and say, actually, this is a fantastic idea. Let's make it a law. Let's make it so that new builds can't be put up without defibrillator plans. And we're determined to get people to listen to us, and for builders to say, actually, you're right. It is so vitally important that we get these defibrillators planned right at the beginning, and we're never going to have this problem in the future that they're not there anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if anyone said it to you, Naomi, but I think rugby are looking at their new MP, to be honest. I really do.
I haven't got time, Claire.
I think you should be an MP. You'd be absolutely fantastic. I think you're so spot on. And when when you say something so obvious, you just think, why hasn't this been done before? Why does it take this situation that our families have found ourselves in this year to come up with this? You think about the amount of money that developers earn compared to a few £600 to put these defibs in cases. A couple of them cases, it's pennies.
Exactly.
It's less than small change to these guys,
Absolutely.
It's crazy. I mean, one of my, obviously, because we're quite a sporty family, we love our football and our sports. One of the things that I speak a lot with my friends about is the fact that a lot of my friends play football in football teams, amateur football teams. Their defibrillators might be, if they're playing on one of these places where there's 10 or so pitches, if they're on the furthest pitch, there could be a 10-minute jog away from the nearest defibrillator. So what I'm saying to my guys at the moment, my friends, is let me raise money to get you one in a kit bag. Don't get it cold. Make sure it stays warm, because we know defibrillators need to stay warm because of the gel pads and the battery life. Have one in your kit bag, just like you'd have your shin pads. Have a defib in your kit bag. When I walk through my local park, which is literally, I go out my house, I turn the corner, my park's in front of me. I'm about 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from the nearest defibrillator. Why don't I walk past one in my local park?
Well, it's funny you should say that. We've just presented so Lawford United Football Club in rugby. They have under 7s, under 8s, under 10s, under 12s, and then the adults team. We've just had I'll quickly show you, hang on. We've just had one of these.
Wonderful.
So this has been presented to Lawford United. So that's going to be pitch side for their games. We also presented one of those to my nephew's football team in Crewe. He's under 7s, and they share that across. So if they've got any tournaments, if the youngsters aren't playing, the adults take it. And I mean, these literally, they're £700. They include the bags. We put them all together, and then we've also had 4 put in lorries for a company in rugby called Share Haulage. They've got them in their lorries, so they're out in the community that way in transport. Electrician that does all our accessible defibrillators, he's having one in his van. That's actually his that I was showing you. That's going in his van tomorrow. So when he's out working in rugby, if he's anywhere, he obviously visits a lot of work sites, and it's going to be in his van. And we've had the stickers made for the vehicles to say there's a defibrillator on board. But something as simple as that, and that's travelling around rugby and all over. And like you say, in football teams, it can happen to children as well. And we should be protecting them. We're working with another football team, Clifton, who are desperately trying to get one. And like they said, we have 22 young men running around, hardly older than Jamie, and it could happen to one of them. If this was pitch side, it would be on them in 30 seconds. It's just so vital.
It is. I'm exactly the same with my my cousin. He runs an under under 10s or under 12s football team, and he's having exactly what you've just shown there, the
Yeah.
defib in the carry bag. And my friend who runs an under 10s, he's also having one. I've just put the order in this week. He's also having one. He also happens to be a window cleaner, Naomi, so very similar. He's going to be driving around. Obviously, he's parked up doing people's windows, so if there was something that happened on the street, he was doing people's windows in, it's there in his van. And when he's not in his van, it's in his kit bag for football. And it's just fantastic, you know, because this could happen if he witnessed something in traffic, you know, driving home. He's also, bless him, Simon, he drives, he's a Fulham fan like us, so he drives up and down the country following Fulham away. So he could be in his van on the well, I'm not familiar with motorways, but the whatever, you know, driving up to Newcastle or whatever, and he could use it there. You know, he does a lot of mileage in his van.
Well, while we're fighting, we're still fighting for the police cars, but actually my husband works for Network Rail, so they're looking at having them put in the Network Rail vans. My dad, like I said, is a coach driver. They're looking at having them in the coaches. Brilliant. You know, if we had someone like National Express coaches or someone like that is on the motorway an awful lot of the time, you know how hard it is for emergency vehicles to reach car accidents, and cardiac arrest is quite common to happen during sort of car accidents, whereas if these are accessible and in traffic, again, it's another campaign that if the government would just sit up and take notice and make it so that, you know, you can't get on a coach without there being a fire extinguisher on there, so why can't there be a defibrillator on there as well?
Exactly. We belt up, we make sure there's a defib on board. That's it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's that simple. And these things aren't expensive, like you say, £750, and you've got yourself a piece of life-saving equipment, Naomi. Absolutely. It's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. I could talk to you all day. I could literally talk to you all day, Naomi. We're going to stop there. And do you know what? I just think let's talk in a few months' time, and we'll see where we've got our new defibrillators. We'll talk about the housing developments and how many housing developers have got on board. Hopefully people are watching this now and thinking, hang on a minute, I need to find out more. I want to do this.
Let's hope that Rishi Sunak is watching and that he stands up and thinks, do you know what? We are the people that can make this actually easier. It doesn't have to be a battle like this. We can make it easier.
No, because you've used that word, Naomi. Fight. We keep fighting, and like you say, it doesn't and it shouldn't be a fight. It shouldn't be a battle. It should be something that everybody just wants to get on board with. Have one of these things, learn how to use a defibrillator. Let's see them up in lights everywhere. And it's just been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Naomi.
Yeah, it's so lovely to see you, and I'm so sorry about your dad. I really wish that I could have met him, because he just sounds amazing, just like you. So I'm sending you so much love as well.
Thank you, Naomi. Well, the same to you. I keep looking at that lovely picture of Jay, and he just looks like such a cheeky, lovely lad.
Honestly, he's just so handsome. This picture really sort of, that's exactly as he was. He was just such a handsome, cheeky, fun-loving boy.
He does look lovely. They'd be proud of us. And like I said to you when we were off air, I said, you know, I'm sure they've met. I'm sure they're up there talking about their love of sports. And
they're probably sitting there now saying, look at these two balling. And we're fine up here watching the World Cup matches or something.
Yeah, exactly. Look at these two gabbing on. That's what my dad would be saying. Oh, thanks, Naomi. And I will so much. Obviously be in touch so soon. And let's revisit this in 3 months and see where we are. And hopefully we'll be celebrating some wins, you know.
Yeah, good luck. Keep on fighting.
Yeah,
we'll keep fighting.
Thanks, Naomi.
All right, take care. Bye.
You too.